Some states may have a beautiful shoreline, but Florida is blessed to have two long, very different coasts on both sides of its peninsula that offer so much variety for recreation. But the question is, which coast is better for you, for coming to visit, or for coming to live? Or even if you already live here, in this video, you'll probably see beaches that you may not have been aware of. It's east versus west, as we compare their differences in beauty, accessibility, activities, sports, nightlife, lighthouses, friendliness, and more. It's time to rediscover Florida. First, let's familiarize you with the names of the different coastal names in Florida. Both sides of the Florida Peninsula have 5 different names. Starting in North Florida on the Atlantic side, you have the First Coast, which covers from the Georgia border to St. Augustine and includes Jacksonville, named so as this is where Ponce de Leon first landed in 1513 and named this body of land La Florida. South of that is the Fun Coast, includes Daytona Beach, New Smyrna Beach. This is the birthplace of car racing, as it would race right on the beach. And today hosts the most famous NASCAR race, the Daytona 500. Next is the Space Coast, a great place to watch NASA or SpaceX launches. Also includes Melbourne and Cocoa Beach, with the best surfing areas in Florida. Further down is the Treasure Coast, named for the Spanish fleet of treasure ships that were lost in 1715 off its shores. Includes Vero Beach, Port St. Lucie, Stuart, Jensen Beach, and Jupiter, in my opinion, are the best beaches of the East Coast. This coast's very underrated, and that is probably because it sits next to the Gold Coast, which gets all the glory. This includes West Palm Beach, Delray Beach, Boca Raton, Deerfield Beach, Pompano Beach, Fort Lauderdale, Hollywood, and Miami, named so for the mansions and lavish lifestyles of the region. And now, let's introduce you to the West Coast, another underrated coast. There's the Nature Coast, we did a video of recently. In Crystal River, you can swim with the manatees, something you definitely have to add to your bucket list. And there's Weeki Wachee Springs, where you can see a mermaid show. South of that is the Sun Coast, which is the Tampa Bay area, starting with the Greek community of Tarpon Springs and the Sponge Docks, Dunedin, and the popular beaches of Clearwater and St. Pete Beach and Anna Maria Island. South of that is the Cultural Coast, named so for the vast array of theatrical arts in the area, especially in Sarasota and Venice. But this also includes some great lesser-known beaches in the Minnesota Boca Grande area. Just did a video here a couple of months ago. South of that is the Lee Island Coast, where we also did a video recently of some of the most beautiful parts of the Gulf Coast. This includes Fort Myers, Sanibel, and Captiva Islands, and Bonita Springs. And finally, the Paradise Coast, just across the state from Miami, includes Naples and Marco Island. Now in the Panhandle, you have the Forgotten Coast and the Emerald Coast, but we are going to focus mostly on the Florida Peninsula in this video. Also, there's the Florida Keys, which we are doing a whole new series of in November, so make sure to subscribe and click the notification bell to see all that. The first advantage has to go to the West Coast for the beautiful sunsets over the Gulf. Hard to beat. Now the sunrise is beautiful, but you have to get up early to see it. And the colors of the waters are just not the same when the sun has been shining down on the Gulf all day. Just gives it a nice warm color as the sun disappears over the deep waters. Now, if you are in the Florida Keys, you get both a sunrise over the Atlantic and the sunset over the Gulf. How about the water itself, the Gulf versus the Atlantic Ocean? Well, both have their advantages. If you're looking for diving or deep sea fishing, the Atlantic is better. And also some just love a true ocean. Certainly better waves for surfers, especially in Jupiter, Melbourne, and Cocoa Beach. However, for dolphins and boat tours, the Gulf would get the advantage. Of course, in Crystal River, there's a reason why they call it the Nature Coast, with plenty of manatees and other sea life. And as you go further south to Clearwater and St. Pete, lots of bottlenose dolphins. If you are a parent with small children, you'll probably prefer the calmer waves of the Gulf. Certainly you'll find more shells and shark teeth, especially when you get south of Sarasota, from Venice to Boca Grande. But on a negative note, the Gulf does have more cases of red tide than the Atlantic Ocean does. So in the category of the water, it's really a toss-up. Now the East Coast has more of a breeze and tends to be a little cooler, whereas the West Coast not as windy, and that breeze tends to be just a little warmer in the summer. So more mosquitoes on the West Coast and more issues with pollen. So advantage East Coast for comfortability of hot summers. This is Daytona Beach, just north of Hollywood, a great beach for nature. Now a disadvantage with the East Coast is the evening sun, especially when you are on the shores with high-rise condos. Like at 2 or 3 o'clock, the beaches start to lose the sun, disappearing behind the buildings, like here at Sunny Isles. Even without the buildings, the sun just loses its brightness quicker. So advantage West Coast as you get more time on the beach with that late afternoon sun. If you are looking for a long scenic drive, the advantage would definitely be with the East Coast. Hwy A1A, now named the Jimmy Buffett Highway, extends from Amelia Island, where we did a video a couple of months ago, all the way down to Miami. On the West Coast, you do not have that. Beginning from the Nature Coast, you have US 19, but it runs quite a distance from the coast. When you get into the Tampa Bay area, you do have Gulf Boulevard from Clearwater Beach to St. Pete Beach, and while you have a couple of nice bridges there at Sand Key and Madeira Beach, it's congested and doesn't hug the coastline. There are some brief periods on Gulf Drive on Anna Maria Island at Coquina Beach and Gulf of Mexico Drive on Longboat Key, but it doesn't go on for very long. One of the most beautiful drives was on Minnesota Key Road, but Hurricanes Helene and Milton destroyed much of that. So the West Coast has some beautiful drives, but they are very limited, and you have to drive around, sometimes quite a ways inland, and then jump back to the coast. Or backtrack, like at Sanibel and Captiva Islands. Now this does give you some nice drives along the causeways to get out to the barrier islands. However, on the East Coast, it's one long highway, maybe a few breaks where you have to go inland across the intracoastal waterway, but usually not very far. Most of Hwy A1A does run along the coast. Now, comparing the interstates, you have I-75 on the West Coast and I-95 on the East Coast. I-95 is more congested, especially when you start getting into the Gold Coast. In Miami, you maybe have the most aggressive drivers in Florida, so be aware of that. On I-75 around Sarasota, more recently Ocala and Gainesville. Go Gators. Anyways, it does get more congested here, but it's still not as bad as Miami. So for overall driving, advantage West Coast. However, for public transportation, hands down the winner is the East Coast, with the high-speed Bright Line comes up the coast from Miami to West Palm Beach, then cuts across Central Florida to Orlando, and hopefully soon will go to Tampa. There's also the Tri-Rail commuter train that goes from Miami Airport all the way up the coast to West Palm Beach. There's light rail systems too in Jacksonville and Miami, whereas there's no system like that in Tampa, other than the slow-moving Tico streetcars. So for public transportation, the East Coast is far, far better. What about the most beautiful beaches? Well, we have to give the edge to the West Coast. The waters in the sand of the North Florida beaches, like Fernandina Beach, Jacksonville, nothing like it is on the West Coast. In all fairness, this was filmed in February, so the water is going to be more colorful in the summer, but still won't have that deep turquoise color of the waters on the West Coast. Now, when you get further down to Jupiter, the watercolor and beaches are great, particularly Dubois Park and Jupiter Beach Park, just beautiful beaches.
It's a good vibe.
And in South Florida, great watercolor, especially in Miami at South Beach. Absolutely gorgeous, but then you are dealing with large crowds too. It is the West Coast that regularly has its beaches ranked highly in TripAdvisor's best beaches in the U.S. Currently, Siesta Key Beach is the #1 beach in the country that we did a video of earlier this year. Known for some of the softest sugar white sand you'll find in the U.S., with the larger Siesta Beach, with lots of water sport fun, and for the nature lovers, Turtle Beach, and there's no high-rises here. Also has a nice, quaint little village of tiki bars and restaurants. Currently number 6 on the list, but has been number 1 multiple times recently, is Clearwater Beach. Now this is a smaller, more congested beach, and full of high-rise resorts, but there's lots of things to do, plenty of water sport fun, and a nice beach boardwalk. St. Pete Beach is regularly in the top 25 and a top favorite. I think the only reason why it is not this year, just because of the hurricanes from last year, but it is pretty much back to normal. By the way, Ormand Beach, the northern part of St. Pete Beach, is great and a great place to stay. Our favorite is the Calm Ocean condos. And there's Anna Maria Island, specifically Coquina Beach and Cortez Beach, I think might be the best beaches in Florida. And this does have good beach accessibility. How this does not make it on TripAdvisor's top 25, I do not know. And you can't beat the beauty of the Fort Myers beaches, where you have Sanibel and Captiva Islands. In North Captiva Island, where you take a ferry to access lots of good vacation rentals, as well as bike and golf cart rentals. A great place to experience island life. Also between Tampa and Fort Myers is Nokomis Beach, also one of the hidden gems of the Gulf Coast. Again, some of the most beautiful beaches in Florida are on the West Coast. Now, the Emerald Coast might have something to say about that. I get it. Those are great beaches, too. We will be doing more videos of soon. Now, when it comes to beach accessibility, I have to give the nod to the East Coast. On the West Coast, the beaches get crowded, and parking is a premium. It either gets filled up quickly or gets expensive to park. Many of us who live in the Tampa Bay area hardly ever go to the beach because it can be a hassle. There's several beaches from Amelia Island to Daytona Beach where you can drive right on the beach, and you don't see that on the West Coast. And there's many areas on the East Coast where there's plenty of parking and free parking, and just much more public beach access points. Very convenient too, as you can often park close to the beach with very little walking. You just don't see much of that on the West Coast, especially on the First Coast, the Fun Coast, the Space Coast, and even all the way down to the Treasure Coast, like at Stuart Beach and Jensen Beach. Even the north end of the Gold Coast, the beaches around Jupiter, all free parking and very convenient. I have a videographer in Jupiter who used to live in Tampa, and he and his wife just love that region. Juno Beach here, just south of Jupiter, is a big sea turtle nesting area from May to midsummer. Now, the state parks charge a very reasonable $5 per car, or $4 if it's just one person, but they are well worth it. This is MacArthur Beach State Park here, located between Juno Beach and Palm Beach. In my opinion, one of the top 3 state parks in Florida. Now, when you start to get into the Gold Coast, at Palm Beach, you do start to see parking fees. It's a whopping $7 an hour here. In Boca Raton, while absolutely beautiful, parking fees are pretty hefty. So for those who want to live near the beach, and if you're the type who wants to regularly visit the beach, you might want to look anywhere from Amelia Island to Jupiter. In Melbourne too, just lots of great beach accessibility. Now for horse rides on the beach, I have to give the nod to the East Coast. There's a couple of areas, one on Amelia Island at Peters Point Park and one at Fort Pierce Beach where you can ride a horse right on the beach. Now on the west coast at Anna Maria Island, you can ride a horse into the bay with sea ponies and a couple of other companies, but I don't know of a place on the west coast where you can actually ride along the beaches. Now for nightlife, the East Coast definitely wins. One of our subscribers, Kim Jeffers, said, "The Southeast Coast is for fun and the Southwest Coast for relaxing. Tampa has Ybor City, but I think it's lacking right now, although there are plans for some revitalization with a soccer stadium and more, and maybe a new baseball stadium too. But the Gold Coast is definitely where it's at. Delray Beach might be the best. It's Atlantic Avenue, has lots of nightlife, yet you feel pretty safe too. It doesn't get too crazy like South Beach. Also Fort Lauderdale, Los Olos Boulevard has great upscale nightlife scene with options for dancing and great restaurants. Now South Beach is world renowned for its clubs, but has gotten a little out of hand. However, they are making an attempt to tone it down a little. This past year, Miami Beach has made it clear they no longer want to be a spring break destination. If you like the old Florida, less concrete high-rise condo areas, the West Coast definitely wins. Before Disney World, Florida was known for its great roadside attractions, but the big theme parks knocked out most of those classic venues. There's none of them left on the East Coast that I know of. However, on the West Coast, there are a few that still remain. Among the most unique is Weeki Wachee Springs, where there's a mermaid show you can see, and also a gorgeous river over springs, and a water park. There's also Sunken Gardens in St. Petersburg. There are also more old Florida-style fishing villages on the West Coast, places like Cortez on Anna Maria Island, and Fort Myers Beach. Well, since the destruction of Hurricane Ian, some of that was lost, but there's still areas where you do see old Florida. Whereas on the East Coast, there's more high-rise condos. Do you like lighthouses? Well, the East Coast gets the advantage there. To my knowledge, there's 3 lighthouses on the West Coast, 2 at Boca Grande, and 1 on Sanibel Island. Whereas on the East Coast, there's 6 that come to mind. On the first coast, the impressive St. Augustine Lighthouse and Maritime Museum. Just south of Daytona Beach, on the Fun Coast, is the Ponce Inlet Lighthouse. The Treasure Coast has the Jupiter Inlet Lighthouse. And the Gold Coast has the Hillsborough Inlet Lighthouse, just north of Pompano Beach. There's also a couple in the Keys, the Alligator Lighthouse we showed in our last Florida Keys video, but you need a boat to get to. Also, there's the lighthouse at Key West, which I guess you could consider it either West Coast or East Coast. For the beauty of the waterways, for boating, it would have to go to the West Coast. Both coasts have the Intracoastal Waterway, which extends for 3,000 miles along Florida's Atlantic and Gulf Coast and all the way to Texas. On the East Coast, it is more defined, more like a river. Generally runs between 90 feet to 150 feet, easier to follow on a boat or jet ski. On the West Coast, it follows large bodies of water, like the Gasparilla Sound in Boca Grande. You do have more islands in the middle here, which offers great undisturbed beaches for boaters. There are much wider inlets on the West Coast, so more fresh, colorful waters from the Gulf come into the inland waterways, whereas on the East Coast the inlets are more narrow and there's not as many. For natural springs, the West Coast definitely wins, especially around Ocala and Gainesville, and Crystal River and Dunellen on the Nature Coast, where you have the Rainbow River, so colorful, and there's no alligators here. Welcome to the Nature Coast! How about shark attacks? Well, recently we just saw a bad one on the west coast, off Gasparilla Island in Boca Grande. Thank God the girl's gonna be okay. But actually, it is the east coast that tends to have more shark attacks. While both coasts are fairly dog-friendly, but to bring your dog on the beach, it would be the East Coast. Most of the West Coast beaches do not allow dogs on the beach. Maybe that's a good thing. It's why they're so clean. But that's why I have a Kurgle dog backpack. I can still bring my dog with me while I walk on the beach. Now, many of these beaches have park areas with cafes off the sand, and dogs are usually allowed there. There is Brohard Paw Park, just south of the Venice Pier, one of the best areas to bring your dog on the beach on the west coast. How about boardwalks? The advantage is definitely with the East Coast. Clearwater has a nice boardwalk, and it's wide, but it's only a half-mile long. The East Coast has many, many more. And in Hollywood, they call it the Broad Walk because it is so wide. This promenade goes on for 2.2 miles, and a more narrow paved path extends for another mile, so it's really over 3 miles long. And Miami Beach is really great as well, as its boardwalk goes on for over 10 miles, running the full length of Miami Beach. How about downtown Riverwalks? Well, that would go to the West Coast. Tampa's Riverwalk is among the top 2 or 3 in the country and has a nice pirate water taxi that travels around it. While downtown Miami has the better food and other advantages, its Riverwalk is not nearly as good as Tampa. Fort Lauderdale has a nice Riverwalk too, and they also have a water taxi and a water trolley for transportation. And Jacksonville has a lot of potential, but not a whole lot in downtown. When it comes to friendliness and courtesy, I have to give the nod to the West Coast. The East Coast tends to attract more people from New York, while the West Coast tends to attract people from Ohio, Michigan, and Wisconsin. No offense to you New Yorkers. If I had to put up with all that Northeast corridor traffic on a daily basis, maybe I wouldn't be so friendly either. But generally, I do find people in Ohio, Michigan, and Wisconsin just tend to be a little more friendlier. While the East Coast has been known for its higher cost of living, especially on the Gold Coast, and the West Coast was known for more affordable housing, but I think the West Coast, especially around Tampa and Sarasota, Fort Myers, are starting to get expensive too. In fact, Tampa, for the first time in many years, has seen more people move out than move in, and I believe a lot of that is from the rising cost of living, as well as higher insurance rates. How about sports? Well, you have to give the edge to the West Coast. As in football, Baker Mayfield and the Bucks are better than both the Dolphins and the Jaguars combined. And the Rays are better than the Marlins. Yes, I might be a little partial there. However, in hockey, the Panthers are the reigning Stanley Cup champions 2 years in a row. And in soccer, there's the Inter Miami. In Tampa is the Tampa Bay Rowdies. Now, the women's soccer team in Tampa are the champions this year. And in basketball, you have the Miami Heat, whereas there's no team on the West Coast, although many in Tampa will root for the Orlando Magic. So I did a poll with you all, and the West Coast won, 71% to 29%. In conclusion, both the Atlantic Coast and the Gulf Coast have their advantages and disadvantages. It really depends on what you like. That's what's nice about Florida. There is so much variety along its coastlines, so much to explore. And the nice thing is, it is just a 2 to 3 hour drive across the state. If you have any questions on Florida, let me know, but ask me in the comments. That way everyone can benefit. I hope this video has given you some good content on this great state. Feel free to share it with your friends and family. So if you love Florida, you'll definitely want to subscribe and click the notification bell. We primarily film in Florida in the winter and spring. Going to do probably a 3-video series in the Florida Keys this fall. So if you have a vacation rental or business and you want to be featured, contact me at info@tampaaerialmedia.com. Also planning on doing a lot of the East Coast and the Panhandle next year as well. Now in the summer, we do film out of state just because the weather is so rainy in Florida, and I really need about 3 days of consecutive sunshine to film a region. Especially the beaches and the water do not look the same when it's cloudy. Planning a long cross-country trip next summer, which I'll probably be doing in an RV. Last year we filmed Vermont, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and Boston. So next, doing a couple of fall colors videos, giving tips on where and when to see the fall colors of New England. For stock footage, you can email me as well at info@tampaaerialmedia.com. Well, from the great state of Florida, I wish blessings to you wherever you may be.